Empires fade, forests reclaim cities, but stories endure. When we walk through the long galleries of Angkor Wat, we are not just looking at sculpture, we are walking through a library carved in stone. The walls are alive. Here, the Mahabharata unfolds. Here, gods and demons churn the cosmic ocean. Here, Yama judges souls. And all of this stands in Cambodia, thousands of kilometers away from India. How did Indian Itihasa cross the ocean? How did these epics take root in Khmer soil? And what does this tell us about how civilizations travel? Today, let us walk slowly along these galleries and read the stone. Imagine entering a vast corridor. A wall stretches for hundreds of meters, and across it, an entire war is unfolding. This is Kurukshetra. You can see armies marching in disciplined formation. Warriors carry bows, spears, shields. Elephants advance, chariots roll forward. Look closely. There is Bhishma, pierced with arrows, lying upon his bed of shafts. There is Arjuna advancing into battle. There are scenes of intense movement, but also of pause, reflection, and inevitability. Now pause and ask yourself, why would a Cambodian empire choose to carve the Mahabharata on its sacred temple walls? Because Mahabharata is not merely a story of war, it is a synthesis on dharma. It asks difficult questions. What is righteous when duty conflicts with your emotions? What does justice mean when both sides believe they are right? How should a ruler act when power and morality collide? For an empire like Angkor, these were not abstract questions. The Khmer court was building one of the largest sacred monuments in the world. Kingship needed legitimacy, power needed philosophy. The Mahabharata provided that moral grammar. In Angkor Wat, the epic becomes political pedagogy. It teaches through images. Indian philosophy is not quoted in Sanskrit here, it is sculpted in sandstone. And what is remarkable is this: the sculptor were Khmer. The artistic style is distinctly Cambodian. The armor, the crowns, the body proportions, all local. This is not imitation, this is assimilation. The story traveled, but it was reborn. Now we arrive at another extraordinary gallery, the Ramayana. The story of Rama unfolds across the walls in a vivid narrative. We see Battle of Lanka, monkeys leap into combat, Rakshasa charge fiercely, Hanuman moves with unstoppable energy, Sri Rama stands poised with bow drawn, Lakshmana fights beside him, Ravana, majestic and formidable, commands the battlefield. But the Ramayana here is not just a heroic tale, it is a story of Maryada, righteous conduct. Rama is revered because he upholds dharma, even at personal cost. In the Khmer context, this story carries deep political resonance. The ideal king is not merely victorious, he is disciplined, he is just, he embodies order. Across Southeast Asia, Ramayana took many forms in dance, theatre, literature, and here at Angkor, it is immortalized in stone. The sculptors capture motion, the tension of bows, the rhythm of battle, the vitality of Vanara army. The epic that once echoed along the sea between Rameshwaram and Lanka now lives beside the Mekong. And again, it is the Khmer expression of Hindu epic. Now we move to perhaps the most iconic relief of Angkor Wat, a monumental panel showing churning of the ocean. It stretches across an entire wall over 40 meters long. On one side stand Devatas and on another side Asuras. Between them, the serpent Vasuki pulled like cosmic rope. At the center rises Mount Mandara, the axis of the universe. And below, Vishnu stabilizes this mountain in Kurmavatara. This is not chaos, this is tension with purpose. Gods and demons, enemies, must cooperate to churn the ocean. Only through effort, struggle, and balance does Amrita, the nectar of immortality, emerge. Now think about this. An empire chooses this story for its central gallery. Why? Because this is more than mythology, it is cosmology. It teaches that order emerges from struggle, that balance is dynamic, that preservation requires effort. It reflects a worldview in which the universe is not static, it is rhythmic. And look carefully at how the Khmer sculptors render the scene. The bodies are rhythmic. The serpent curves in elegant repetition. The figures seem almost to move as you walk. This is a sculpture, bas relief, designed to be experienced in motion. The story does not sit still, it unfolds as you move along the gallery, just as cosmic time unfolds. This is how an idea from Puranic imagination of India finds new life in Southeast Asia. It is internalized. It represents the efforts of Suryavarman II to bring back the glory of Khmer civilization. It becomes Khmer cosmology. Further along the gallery, the tone shifts. The scenes grow intense. Here we see Yama, the Lord of Justice, seated in judgment. Below him, souls endure punishment. Some are pulled, some are bound, some are cast into suffering. Above, the celestial realm unfolds. Dancers, divine beings, serenity. This is a karmic law made visible. The idea that actions have consequences, that life extends beyond death, that justice is cosmic, not merely earthly. Now imagine being a devotee walking through this temple in 12th century. You are not reading a scripture, you are walking through it. Ethics is not abstract, it surrounds you. The temple becomes a moral universe. Architecture becomes a teacher. In this way, Indian metaphysical ideas, karma, rebirth, cosmic justice, are translated into Khmer visual language. And once again, they are reinterpreted. Figures look Cambodian, aesthetics is local, but the philosophical foundation is shared. In one remarkable panel, we encounter something different. It is history. We see Suryavarman II seated in court. He is surrounded by officials. Umbrellas of sovereignty hover over him. Military commanders stand in orderly fashion. But this is not simple portraiture, this is theology. Angkor Wat was originally dedicated to Vishnu. King aligns himself with Vishnu, the preserver of cosmic order. In doing so, kingship becomes sacred responsibility. The ruler is not merely political, he is a cosmic custodian, a custodian of dharma. The bas relief integrate epic, cosmology, and royal authority into one seamless vision. Empire, ethics, and metaphysics become inseparable. And that is the genius of Angkor Wat. It is not just a temple, it is a civilizational statement. Now let us step back. How did this narrative reach Cambodia? Not through conquest, not through armies, but through trade route, maritime networks, scholars, priests, merchants, artisans. Across the Bay of Bengal, ideas traveled. Sanskrit inscriptions appear in Southeast Asia. Royal names echo Indian lineages. Rituals, cosmology, temple architecture all evolve in a dialogue. But here is the crucial point. India did not export monuments. It exported framework. It exported cosmology. It exported narrative structures. It exported philosophical vocabulary. Local cultures made these their own. Angkor Wat shows us India outside India, a civilizational dialogue of ancient Kambuja with Bharat, a conversation that lasted for centuries. Today, as we walk through these galleries, something profound happens. We recognize the stories, we recognize Bhishma, we recognize Vishnu, we recognize Samudra Manthana, and yet they appear in unfamiliar artistic language. It reminds us that civilization is not confined by geography. It is carried by memory. It is carried by story. It is carried by shared imagination. Angkor Wat tells us that Indian Itihasa was always civilizational, and it reminds us of something else. The stone remembers what we have forgotten. It remembers that ideas once traveled freely across oceans, that cultural exchange was confident, not insecure, that philosophy would shape empire, the architecture could teach ethics. When we read these bas reliefs carefully, we are not just studying art history, we are rediscovering a connected world, an ancient Bharat of ideas. Empires fade, forests reclaim the cities, but stories endure. In Angkor Wat, Mahabharata still marches. The ocean is still being churned. Yama still judges, and Vishnu still preserves. The stone epic continues to speak. The question is, are we listening? What are your thoughts on this? Please share it in the comments. If you want to explore science behind temples, ancient temple culture, or want to know more about ancient knowledge system, stay tuned to this channel.